The Legend of Jigong Chapter 33.
Jigong arrives at the sprawling estate of Squire Liang, who is literally known as Liang the Millionaire, and he immediately gets into a shouting match with the gatekeepers.
So, to really grasp this, we have to talk about the architecture of a wealthy Song dynasty estate, the Dazai.
Okay, set the scene for us.
The outer wall and the main gate, they serve as this rigid demarcation line. On one side, you have the public street, which is full of commerce and poverty and chaos. And on the other side, you have the ordered, opulent, highly regulated hierarchy of the inner courtyard.
So the servants at the gate are doing a lot more than just opening doors.
Oh, absolutely. They are the border patrol of a sovereign economic zone. And when Jigong demands entry, they demand a menbao.
Which is a bribe, an entry fee.
Right. It operates almost like a localized, unofficial tariff system. In the bureaucratic reality of late imperial China, corruption wasn't an aberration. It was an institutionalized parallel economy.
So the menbao was just the accepted way that the lowest-ranking people in a powerful house made their money.
Exactly. They commodified their proximity to power. If a merchant or a petitioner or, a monk wanted to pass a message to the master, they had to pay the toll.
They privatized the front door.
They really did.
But Jigong doesn't have any money. Or at least he chooses to look like he doesn't. So he refuses to pay. But I love this part. He doesn't just argue with them on moral grounds. He doesn't give them a lecture on greed.
No, he bypasses their authority completely by deploying this terrifying piece of spiritual terminology.
He points at the house and says he sees a dark aura. The 5 ghosts flying sickle evil aura. It is just such an intense phrase.
It is. And the mechanics of that specific phrase, the Wugi Fi Lian Sha, they warrant a really close look.
Break it down for us.
Well, Jigong is a Buddhist monk, right? But the terminology he uses here is deeply rooted in Taoist geomancy, feng shui, and popular Chinese folk religion.
So he is borrowing from another tradition entirely.
Yeah. The concept of Sha, or a malignant aura, represents a major disruption in the natural flow of cosmic energy. It usually manifests as a physical illness or a sudden disaster.
It is not just like a vague bad vibe.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It is a technical diagnosis of a structural spiritual failure. And the 5 ghosts in esoteric traditions are associated with plague or sudden misfortune or malevolent spirits.
And the flying sickle part.
That suggests a sharp, aggressive, cutting energy. It could be related to a harsh architectural angle of a neighboring building directing negative ki toward the estate, or maybe an astrological misalignment.
So by shouting about this 5 ghosts flying sickle, he is doing something incredibly calculated. I mean, think about it like this. It is like an emergency room doctor showing up at your house to save your life, and your security guard asks the doctor for a cover charge.
That is a perfect analogy. If he just said, "Hi, I am a monk here to pray for the sick," the gatekeepers would classify him as a beggar and kick him out.
Right, because he didn't pay the bribe.
Exactly. But by screaming this highly technical, violent diagnosis, he creates a panic that totally transcends the gatekeeper's authority. The sheer volume and specificity of the threat pierce the inner walls of the estate.
It is acoustic warfare. He is hacking their social system by making the threat so loud that only the master of the house can deal with it.
And it works flawlessly. Squire Liang hears the commotion and comes out.
Because he is desperate. His son is actually gravely ill.
Yeah, so the squire immediately circumvents his own corrupt border patrol and brings this ragged monk right into the inner sanctum. We move from this dusty transactional gatehouse into the most protected, opulent space in the estate, the East Room.
And the sensory contrast there is just amazing. The text really highlights it. The East Room is heated, it is secluded, surrounded by servants. It is the pinnacle of material wealth.
But at the center of all that absolute material security is this profound vulnerability. The son, Liang Xiuan, is comatose on the bed.
Right. All the millions of strings of cash the squire has are totally useless here. Wealth has completely failed to preserve life.
Into this terrifying, sterile environment steps Jigong, clothed in rags and smelling like the street.
And what does he do? He tells the panicking father to relax. Then he walks up to the boy, takes off his own monk's hat, which, by the way, the text makes clear, is thick with dirt and sweat, and he just casually drops it onto the kid's head.
The mechanism of this miracle is deliberately grotesque. It completely subverts our expectation of purity.
Yeah, usually you expect anointed oils or pure water.
Right, glowing relics. But Jigong uses the literal detritus of his own eccentric, impoverished life.
But he pairs it with a verbal command. He chants this hybrid mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Chili Hi.
And this linguistic construction is really the key to understanding Jigong's whole operational philosophy.
Let's unpack that because it is fascinating. The first part, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Right, that is the most ubiquitous and sacred mantra in Mahayana Buddhism. It invokes Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of infinite compassion.
Guanyin, right.
Exactly, Guanyin in China. It is this profound, elevated petition for universal grace and mercy.
But then he follows it up with Om Chili He.
Yeah, which violently shifts the theological paradigm. That construction comes directly from Daoist ritual magic, specifically the Leifa or thunder magic traditions that were huge during the Song dynasty.
Thunder magic, that sounds intense.
It is. Chile translates to by imperial command, or let it be swiftly ordered. It mimics the language of a bureaucratic state edict, and he is this forceful, explosive syllable used to drive away demons.
So he is taking the pure, compassionate grace of Buddhism and stapling it to the martial, bureaucratic enforcement of a Taoist exorcism.
Yeah, it is the theological equivalent of pairing a plea for universal peace with a tactical drone strike.
That is exactly what it is, and it shows how pragmatic he is. He doesn't care about doctrinal purity. He just uses whatever spiritual technology works to bend reality to his will.
Right. And the combination of the filthy hat and the hybrid mantra acts as a metaphysical shock to the system.
And it works instantly. The second the hat hits his head and the command is given, the son opens his eyes. He wakes up from a coma, sighs, and asks for water. Boom, cured.
The existential crisis of the household is resolved in seconds by a guy who looks like he lives in a ditch.
But then we get the father's reaction, which is just so telling. The squire is thrilled, obviously, but his brain is still stuck in this mercantile paradigm.
Right. His immediate impulse is acquisition.
He literally looks at the monk and asks, "How much money do you want to sell the hat for?" "I want to keep it for my son." Wait, he actually asks to buy a holy relic like it's a used car? What does this say about his mindset?
It reveals a profound category error. The Song dynasty had this massive commercial revolution, right? Paper money, the jiaozi, maritime trade, urban markets, everything was commodified.
And he is trying to apply that capitalist logic to divine grace.
Exactly. He sees the miracle as a medical technology. And if it works, the logical next step for a millionaire is to buy the patent and hoard it.
He wants to put universal compassion on his balance sheet. He thinks money can buy the divine. But Jigong's response is just brilliant satire. He doesn't lecture him. He just counters his offer.
Yeah, he accepts the premise of the negotiation. He says, sure, the hat is for sale. The price is just your entire estate.
All your land, your businesses, your cash. Total liquidation for the hat.
He pushes the squire's logic to its absolute extreme. If the hat controls life and death, its market value has to exceed all earthly possessions.
And the squire immediately backs down like, "Oh, I can't afford that."
Jigong uses the language of the marketplace to prove that the marketplace is totally inadequate.
You want to buy enlightenment. It costs everything. It is a stunning rebuke. But Jigong doesn't just leave after making his point. He wants his reward. And this leads us to something that completely violates everything we know about monks.
Right, he doesn't ask for a bowl of rice or a place to sleep.
No, he bypasses the squire, calls for the head chef, and places an order that would make a food critic blush.
He demands sugar-mixed candied fruits, elaborately prepared cold cuts, hot meat stir-fries, and a top-tier seafood banquet.
And he wants it served right there in the master's quarters, which is wild because let's talk about the Vinaya again.
Yeah, the Buddhist monastic code. Monks are supposed to be strictly vegetarian, no meat, to uphold the precept against killing, and they usually fast after the midday meal.
So ordering a massive seafood feast is a huge, aggressive violation of his vows. And he is doing it right in front of his host.
Well, historically, this gets interpreted through the lens of Chan or Zen Buddhism, the tradition of crazy wisdom.
Right, the idea that true enlightenment means you aren't bound by physical rules. Meat is just cabbage to a fully realized being.
Exactly. But in this specific story, his demands have a really immediate tactical purpose. The squire categorizes everyone by wealth. Monks are poor, subservient ascetics.
By demanding a luxury feast, Jigong breaks the squire's brain. He forces the millionaire to serve the beggar like a king.
It is a hostile takeover of the household's social hierarchy.
And he doesn't stop there. While the kitchen is freaking out, Jigong casually mentions he has 3 followers waiting outside who also need food. So the squire sends his servant, Liang Fu, to get them.
And we really need to look at Liang Fu's internal logic here. He operates on the same superficial matrix as the gatekeepers.
He judges everyone by how they look.
Right. He saw Jigong in rags, so he assumes the followers are going to be the absolute dregs of society. Beggars, vagrants.
But when he gets to the gate, The guys standing there are Gao Tai, Su Lu, and Feng Shen. And the text makes a big deal about their clothes. Gao Guotai is a refined scholar. Su Lu works for another millionaire and is wearing premium tailored garments.
Which is a big deal because Song Dynasty society was heavily regulated by sumptuary laws. The color of your silk, the style of your hat, it all legally enforced your exact social rank.
Clothing was basically your resume. So when Liang Fu sees these impeccable clothes on men who claim to follow a beggar, his brain just blue screens.
He can't reconcile the paradox, so he comes up with this masterpiece of flawed materialistic reasoning.
He assumes the monk must actually be a secret billionaire. It is like seeing a tech CEO dressed like a homeless person while all his assistants wear Armani suits. The servant just assumes the monk has so much money he can afford to dress his entourage in custom silk as a flex while wearing rags himself.
Right, because Liang Fu literally cannot conceive of spiritual authority existing without financial power.
So his whole demeanor changes. He invites them in and treats them to a massive feast in the gatehouse. The servants totally missed the literal miracle that just happened inside, but they bow down to expensive silk.
They worship the silk, not the soul. It exposes the shallow, transactional nature of the whole society.
So now Jigong has totally dominated the house. The kid is cured, the monk is eating a seafood feast, the squire is pouring his wine, the followers are eating like kings. It is a perfect monopoly. But then a threat arrives.
A servant sneaks in and whispers to the squire that the Dao Ye, the Taoist priest Zhang Miaxing, has arrived at the front door.
And the squire just panics because he double-booked his spiritual contractors.
Which is a stunning revelation of his approach to faith. The religious landscape of the Southern Song was highly competitive. You had Buddhism, Taoist sects, folk religions, all fighting for patronage.
And the squire doesn't care about the theology at all. He doesn't care about the Tao or Buddhist emptiness. He just had a dying son, so he threw his money at every available spiritual mercenary in the phone book.
He approached his son's soul the way you'd approach a leaky roof. Call 3 plumbers and pay the first one who stops the leak.
I find the squire's reaction fascinating. He's totally secular in his thinking, right? He's basically hedging his bets with 2 different spiritual contractors. But now he has 2 incredibly powerful practitioners under his roof at the same time.
And he is terrified of offending either of them. Because if they lose face, they might retract their favor or even use their magic against him.
But Jigong notices the whispering. And he gives the squire an out. But he does it with this amazing calculated insult. He waves his hand and says, "Squire, you must have a guest. Go attend to them. It's probably your sister-in-law."
That specific insult is carrying so much semantic weight. By calling the Taoist priest a sister-in-law, Jigong is doing a few things. First, he is showing he knows exactly who is at the door, ruining the squire's secrecy.
And second, he is completely emasculating his rival.
Right. He strips the Taoist of his martial and spiritual authority before the guy even enters the room. He reduces a feared master to a gossiping female relative in a patriarchal society.
It shows Jigong isn't threatened at all. He's just chilling, eating his seafood, letting the squire sweat.
So the squire runs off to the outer study to manage the Taoist, probably thinking he can keep them in separate rooms and pay them both off.
He thinks the transaction is done. The kid is fine, the monk is fed, but Jigong is not going to let him off that easy. The second the squire leaves, Jigong does something that completely changes the tone of the story.
This is the fulcrum of the chapter, and it challenges everything we think we know about enlightened beings.
So the freshly cured son is sitting up in bed, drinking sugar water, totally fine. Jigong stands up, walks over, and without a word, just snatches his grimy hat right off the kid's head.
And the reaction is catastrophic. The text says, Liang Xiuan instantly falls backward, his eyes roll back, and he goes straight back into a critical coma.
The miracle is just revoked, instantly. And the servants start screaming, asking why he did that. And Jigong, holding the hat, casually says, "Well, a feast only takes so long to eat. I'm keeping the hat so I can trade it for another banquet later when I get hungry again."
He explicitly links the young man's life to his future culinary demands.
Wait, this is actually incredibly dark. He uses a man's life as a bargaining chip, just to secure a future meal. Is Jigong supposed to be the hero here? I mean, he is basically running a protection racket on a kid's soul.
Your reaction is exactly what the text is aiming for. If we use standard ethics, his actions are indefensible. They are sociopathic. But in the context of Mahayana Buddhism, we have to talk about the concept of upaya.
Upa.
Yeah, skillful means. It is the idea that an enlightened being can use highly unconventional, shocking, or even immoral methods if it is the most effective way to shatter someone's delusions and lead them to liberation.
So putting a kid into a coma is a skillful pedagogical technique that feels like a massive theological loophole for bad behavior.
But look at the strategy. Why does he revoke the miracle right when the Taoist arrives? Because the competitor threatens the lesson. If the son stays cured, the squire's worldview is validated. He pays both guys and learns nothing. He still thinks money buys reality.
Ah, okay. By taking the hat back, he ensures the crisis is ongoing. The squire still needs the monk.
Exactly. He proves that the healing wasn't a commodity the squire bought. It is an ongoing exertion of divine will, and Jigong is the landlord who just changed the locks. He forces the squire to see that his wealth is totally impotent.
I hear you on the theology, but I still wonder if this is just a populist revenge fantasy. The lower classes in the Song dynasty suffered under these untouchable elites. Isn't it possible people just loved reading about a beggar monk terrorizing an arrogant millionaire?
Oh, absolutely. That sociological reading is very valid. Vernacular fiction, or huwaben, was a release valve for class tension. Jigong has ultimate power, but he refuses to play by the elite's economic rules. He just manipulates them for fun. That ambiguity is why the text survives.
And his exit from the room perfectly captures that ambiguity. He doesn't teleport away to go fight the Taoist. He tells the weeping servants he has to go to the bathroom, the Mao King.
The latrine, and he adds this absurd rule yelling at them not to follow him because he can't do his business if someone is watching.
It is the ultimate mix of sacred and profane. He has the power over life and death in one hand, and he's complaining about stage fright at the urinal with the other. You just can't romanticize the guy.
So he slips out, not to the latrine, but to the west courtyard, to eavesdrop on the squire and Zhang Miuxing in the outer study.
And we get a masterclass in psychological warfare. The squire's trying to play nice with the Taoist, and he makes a huge mistake. He asks Zhang if he knows a monk named Jigong.
And we get Zhang's internal monologue here. It is just pure professional jealousy. He thinks, if I admit this monk is good, I lose standing with the patron.
It is a competitive market. Acknowledging a rival hurts your brand, so Zhang just goes scorched earth. He tells the squire, oh, that drunken, crazy, ignorant nobody, he's not even worth mentioning.
He dismisses him as a total failure of a practitioner.
And the timing is amazing. The exact second he says that, Jigong violently yanks the curtain aside and storms in. He was literally waiting for his cue, and he booms. Good miscellaneous hair Taoist, insulting people behind their backs.
The insult miscellaneous hair Taoist, or Zamao Lao Dao, is so specific and so offensive in Chinese religious culture.
Let's talk about that. Why target the hair?
In Taoism, the physical body is a microcosm of the universe. They followed the Confucian idea that you don't damage your hair or skin because your parents gave it to you. So Taoist priests didn't shave their heads like Buddhists. They grew their hair long and tied it in a pristine topknot with a pin. The purity of the hair reflected their internal spiritual discipline.
Oh, wow. So calling his hair miscellaneous or mixed is an attack on his spiritual purity.
Exactly. It implies he is a mutt, a fake priest with chaotic energy. It hits the very core of his identity.
So Zhang is caught red-handed, and he's been insulted in front of his patron. He opens his mouth to defend himself, but Jigong doesn't let him speak. He executes this insane psychological pivot. He waves his hand and says, oh, don't be offended. I wasn't cursing you. I was cursing that other Taoist in the room.
Which is wild, because there is absolutely no other Taoist in the room.
It is a totally brazen lie. He is gaslighting him into oblivion. It forces Zhang to either argue with an invisible man or just sit there in silence. He's just paralyzed by the monk's sociopathic confidence.
And while Zhang's brain is short-circuiting, Jigong physically takes over the space.
Yeah. He pulls up a chair and literally starts eating the Taoist's food and drinking his wine. Remember, he just walked away from a massive seafood banquet. He isn't hungry. He's just doing it to assert dominance. He breaches his space, insults his religion, scrambles his reality, and steals his dinner.
He's dismantling the man's ego using the same mechanics of disruption he used on the gatekeepers.
Then he starts the interrogation. He's chewing on stolen food and asks, so what's your surname? Zhang snaps back, you know my surname is Zhang, why are you asking? And then Jigong delivers the kill shot. He leans in and asks, say, do you happen to know my grand disciple, a guy named Hua Qingfeng?
Okay, the explosive force of this question is tied to the lineage system in Chinese esoteric traditions. Your master is your father. Your master's master is your grandfather. Lineage is everything. It dictates your authority and demands absolute reverence.
And Hua Qingfeng is not a random guy.
No. Hua Qingfeng is Zhang Miaoxing's direct master.
Let me make sure I'm mapping this family tree right. Jigong is claiming that Zhang's master is Jigong's grand disciple.
Yes, that places Jigong at least 3 or 4 generations above Zhang in the spiritual hierarchy.
This is incredible. Jigong walks in, eats the guy's food, gaslights him about who he was insulting, and then basically says, "Oh yeah, your master, he calls me grandpa." It's like a professional wrestling promo.
It is the ultimate violation of protocol. He is saying Zhang's entire tradition is just a tiny diluted trickle of Jigong's massive authority.
And that is the breaking point. Zhang completely loses his mind. The text says his anger rushes up, and his internal monologue goes straight to homicidal intent. He thinks, "I'm going to end his life right now."
The polite social veneer is totally gone.
He leaps up, screams, "You speak nonsense, I will end you." And he starts throwing complex hand seals and chanting a deadly magical mantra.
And just like that, the narrative violently shifts genres. We've been analyzing this sharp, satirical comedy of manners all episode. Bribes, healthcare economics, sumptuary laws. And suddenly, because of a bruised ego, it turns into high fantasy Xiangxia magical combat.
We went from arguing over a $20 cover charge to a medical hostage negotiation to a seafood extortion plot to a gaslighting masterclass, and now two wizards are about to vaporize each other in a millionaire's living room.
All under the roof of a guy who just wanted to make a simple capitalist transaction to save his kid.